The doorbell rang on a Saturday morning, and I was not expecting anyone. I had been staying at my mother Sabrina's house for the past few days, helping her sort through paperwork after my grandfather Harold passed away 2 weeks earlier. When I opened the door, I saw my father Gregory, standing next to a woman 10 years younger than my mother. Diane, his new wife, wore a greedy smirk on her face. She carried an expensive designer handbag, and her eyes measured the house like she was already calculating its value. My father stood silent beside her, looking uncomfortable. Diane spoke first, her voice sharp and entitled. "We're here for our rightful share of your grandfather's estate. You need to move out immediately. Before I continue this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Have you ever witnessed family members fight over money after a loved one passed away? If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Because what happened next taught me that greed always reveals people's true colors, and sometimes justice comes in the most unexpected ways. Now let me tell you how this all unfolded. I need to take you back a bit so you can understand how we got here. My childhood was filled with warmth and laughter. My grandfather Harold had been a small-time real estate businessman who retired early and lived comfortably. Our family used to gather at his house every Sunday. He had this beautiful 2-story home in the suburbs, with a small garden where he grew roses. He loved those roses more than anything, except maybe my mother and me. My father Gregory worked as an accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown. My mother Sabrina taught elementary school, and she had this gentle way about her that made every student love her. I remember evenings when Grandpa Harold would teach me chess while Mom cooked dinner in the kitchen. Dad would come home late sometimes, but he always had a smile and would ruffle my hair before sitting down to eat. We were happy. Or at least I thought we were. Everything started falling apart 3 years ago. I was 24, fresh out of college with a business degree, trying to figure out my career path. That is when I noticed Dad changing. He came home later and later. He stopped joining us for Sunday dinners at Grandpa's house. He became cold and distant, barely speaking to Mom except when necessary. Mom tried everything to hold our family together. She cooked his favorite meals, suggested date nights, asked if something was wrong at work. But Dad just brushed her off with vague excuses about being busy and stressed. Then one Thursday evening in March, I was meeting a friend for dinner at a restaurant across town. I walked in and froze. There was my father sitting in a corner booth with a woman I had never seen before. She was younger, probably in her early 30s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive clothes. They were holding hands across the table. They were laughing. Dad looked happier than I had seen him in months. I felt sick to my stomach. I turned around and left before they could see me. I did not know what to do. Should I tell Mom? Should I confront Dad? I struggled with this for 2 days before Dad made the decision for me. He came home on Saturday morning and told Mom he wanted a divorce. Just like that. No build-up, no gentle approach. He said he had met someone else, someone who made him feel alive again. Her name was Diane, and she worked at his firm as a financial analyst. Mom was devastated. I watched my strong, loving mother crumble. She cried for days. But even through her pain, she maintained her dignity. When they discussed the divorce, Dad wanted to split everything 50-50. But here is the thing. The house they lived in, a nice 3-bedroom ranch-style home, had been a gift from Grandpa Harold to my mother when she and Dad got married. It was in her name only. Dad had no legal claim to it. Still, he tried to argue that he deserved compensation for the years of marriage. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Mom kept the house. Dad moved in with Diane almost immediately. Grandpa Harold was already in declining health by then, but learning about the betrayal hit him hard. He had always liked my father, treated him like a son. He told me once, about a month after the divorce was final, that he felt guilty for not seeing Dad's true character earlier. I assured him it was not his fault. Nobody could have predicted this. The 2 years following the divorce were difficult but healing. Mom threw herself into her teaching job. She found comfort in her students and in her friends from church. I visited her every weekend, and slowly I watched her rebuild her sense of self. Dad, meanwhile, married Diane in a quick courthouse ceremony. I was invited but did not attend. Neither did Grandpa Harold. We heard through relatives that Diane loved the finer things in life. Designer bags, expensive dinners, luxury vacations. Dad was working overtime to keep up with her spending habits. Then, 2 weeks before that Saturday morning, Grandpa Harold died suddenly from a heart attack. He was 79 years old. It happened quickly. He was in his garden pruning his beloved roses when he collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Mom and I were heartbroken. He had been our rock, our constant source of wisdom and love. The funeral was small but beautiful. Dad showed up alone. Diane had not come, claiming she had a work commitment she could not miss. Dad stood in the back during the service looking uncomfortable and left immediately after. Grandpa Harold's will was straightforward. He left his house, a beautiful 2-story property worth about $350,000, and his savings of approximately $80,000 to my mother. Everything was clearly documented and legally sound. His lawyer, an older gentleman named William Patterson, had handled the estate planning 2 years earlier, right after Mom's divorce. Grandpa had been very specific in his instructions. He wanted to make sure Mom was taken care of. He also set up a small trust fund for me, $25,000 to be used for my future, or to help support my mother if needed. Mom and I spent the days after the funeral going through Grandpa's things. It was emotional work. Every item held a memory: his chess set, his collection of gardening books, his photographs of our family spanning decades. We were taking our time, not rushing the process. Mom had taken a week off from school, and I had arranged to work remotely so I could be with her. That Saturday morning, we were sitting in the living room sorting through old photo albums when the doorbell rang. When I opened the door and saw Dad with Diane, my first thought was that they had come to offer condolences. Maybe Dad had finally found some courage to apologize for not being there more during this difficult time. I was wrong. The moment I saw Diane's expression, that calculating look in her eyes as she surveyed the house, I knew this was not a sympathy visit. I called out to Mom. "Mom, Dad's here with Diane." I heard her sharp intake of breath from the living room. She came to the door, her face pale but composed. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Diane stepped forward, not even bothering with a greeting. "We're here to discuss Harold's estate," she said, her voice cold and businesslike. "Gregory has rights to a portion of it, and we need to settle this quickly. We have plans for the money." Mom's hand went to her throat. "Plans? What are you talking about? Harold left everything to me in his will." Diane's smile widened, and it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who thought they had already won. "Well, that is where things get complicated," she said. "You see, Harold made verbal promises to Gregory years ago. We have documentation. And as his former son-in-law, Gregory contributed to this family. He deserves compensation." I felt my blood pressure rising. "You cannot be serious right now." Dad finally spoke, his voice quiet and weak. "Son, just hear us out. Your grandfather and I talked about this before the divorce. He mentioned leaving me something. Diane thinks we have a case." I stared at him in disbelief. "You have got to be kidding me. Grandpa died 2 weeks ago. You could not even be bothered to bring your wife to his funeral, and now you are here making claims on his estate." Diane pulled out her phone and showed us a printed email. "This," she said triumphantly, "is proof. An email from Harold to Gregory from 3 years ago. Read the second paragraph." I took the paper and read it. It was indeed from Grandpa, dated before the divorce. In it, Grandpa was responding to a question Dad had asked about retirement planning. There was a line that said, "Do not worry, Gregory. I will make sure to leave something for you when the time comes. You are family." It was casual, conversational, not a legal promise. "This does not mean anything," I said, handing the paper back. "This was written before the divorce, when you were still part of this family. Things changed." Diane's eyes flashed. "A promise is a promise. We can challenge the will. We have consulted with a lawyer, and he says we have grounds. Harold's estate should be split between Sabrina and Gregory. That is only fair." Mom finally found her voice. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? My father worked his entire life to build security for his family. He left everything to me because he knew I would need it. You have no claim here." Diane laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, you are going to learn real quick that the legal system does not care about feelings. We are entitled to our share, and we are going to get it." Before I could respond, Diane pushed past me and walked into the house. "Diane, you cannot just," I started, but she ignored me. She walked through the living room, looking around like she was appraising property for sale. She stopped in front of a painting on the wall, a beautiful landscape that Grandpa had bought on a trip to Colorado 20 years ago. "This must be worth a few thousand," she said, running her finger along the frame. We will take half of everything. The house, the savings, the personal property. All of it. I moved quickly to block her path. Get out of my mother's house right now. She turned to face me and there was something genuinely frightening in her expression. Pure greed mixed with contempt. This is not her house anymore, she said slowly. This is community property now. Or it will be once we file our claim. You have 3 days to get yourself a lawyer and sit down with us to discuss a settlement. Otherwise, we are going to court, and trust me, that will be much more expensive and painful for everyone. Mom had started shaking. I could see tears forming in her eyes, but she was trying so hard to hold them back. I put my arm around her shoulders. You need to leave, I said to Dad, ignoring Diane. Whatever you think you are doing here, it ends now. Grandpa left everything to Mom legally. You have no case. Dad would not meet my eyes. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the floor like a scolded child. Diane pulled out her phone again and started taking pictures of the living room. Just documenting assets, she said cheerfully. My lawyer will need this. Oh, and Gregory told me about that lovely garden out back. We will probably sell this place and split the proceeds. It is a great location. Should get top dollar. She paused at the door and looked back at us. 3 days. Get a lawyer. We will be in touch to set up a meeting. And honestly, if you just agree to our terms now, we can avoid all this unpleasantness. 50-50 split. Simple. After they left, Mom collapsed onto the couch. She was not just crying anymore. She was sobbing, her whole body shaking with the force of her grief and fear. I sat beside her, holding her, feeling completely helpless. How could Dad do this? And how could he let that woman come into Grandpa's house and treat Mom like this? It felt like a nightmare. That night I could not sleep. I lay in the guest room at Mom's house, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. 3 days. Diane had given us 3 days. I thought about Grandpa Harold. I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all those chess games, all the times he had told me to always protect the people I loved. He had protected Mom by writing that will. Now it was my turn to protect her. Early Sunday morning, I made a decision. I looked up the phone number for William Patterson, Grandpa's lawyer. I knew it was the weekend, but his voicemail said he checked messages regularly for urgent matters. I left a detailed message explaining what had happened and asking him to call me back as soon as possible. To my surprise, he called back within 2 hours. I was expecting something like this, he said when I finished explaining. Your grandfather warned me that Gregory might try something. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? Bring that email Diane showed you if you can get a copy. Monday morning, I met Mr. Patterson at his office downtown. He was in his late 60s with white hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office was filled with law books and had a comfortable, trustworthy feeling to it. I showed him a photo I had taken of the email on my phone. He studied it carefully, then smiled. This means absolutely nothing legally, he said. This is a casual conversation between family members. It has no bearing on the official will, which was written, signed, witnessed, and notarized 2 years after this email was sent. He opened a file on his desk and pulled out several documents. Your grandfather came to see me about 3 months after your parents' divorce was finalized. He was very clear about his wishes. He wanted everything to go to Sabrina. He specifically mentioned that Gregory was no longer to be considered in any estate planning. We discussed the possibility of someone challenging the will, and he was confident it would hold up. And he was right. Mr. Patterson leaned back in his chair. Here is what is going to happen. Diane and Gregory can try to challenge the will, but they will lose. They have no legal standing. That email is not a contract or a promise. It was written when Gregory was still married to your mother, and even then it is too vague to constitute any kind of binding agreement. So Mom is safe. They cannot take any. Patterson nodded. The will is ironclad. But I have an even better idea. Let them come back. Let them make their demands again. And I will be there to shut this down permanently. Your grandfather also left specific instructions about this. He set aside $5,000 from the estate specifically to cover legal fees if anyone challenged his will. He wanted to make sure Sabrina would be protected. He paused and looked at me seriously. There is something else your grandfather wanted you to know. That trust fund he left you. It was not just for your future. He told me that if anything like this ever happened, if your mother was ever threatened or harassed over his estate, he wanted you to use that money to help her, to hire security if needed, to renovate the house if she wanted to make it feel like her own space, whatever she needed. He knew you would take care of her. I felt tears pricking my eyes. Even in death, Grandpa was still protecting us. So what do we do now? I asked. Mr. Patterson smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in his expression. Call your father. Tell him you want to meet, tomorrow at 10 in the morning at your mother's house. Tell him to bring Diane and any documentation they think supports their case. I will be there. And trust me, this will be the last time they bother your mother. I went home and told Mom everything. For the first time in days, I saw hope return to her eyes. That evening, I called Dad's phone. Diane answered, which annoyed me, but I kept my voice neutral. We want to meet, I said. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. At the house. Bring whatever evidence you think you have. We will discuss this once and for all. Diane sounded pleased, finally being reasonable. Good. We will be there. And I hope you have thought about our offer. 50-50 is more than fair. The next morning, Mom and I were both nervous. Mr. Patterson arrived at 9:30 to go over the plan. Just let them talk, he advised. Let Diane make her demands. Then I will step in. At exactly 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Dad and Diane standing there. Diane was dressed in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase like she was heading into a corporate negotiation. She had that same smug smile on her face. So she said, brushing past me into the living room, Have you thought about our offer? 50-50 split. We can have our lawyers draw up the papers this week. You can be out of the house by the end of the month. I looked at Mom, who nodded slightly. Actually, I said, someone wants to meet you. Diane looked confused. That is when Mr. Patterson stepped out from the kitchen where he had been waiting. Good morning, he said pleasantly. I am William Patterson, estate attorney for the late Harold Thompson. I believe we need to have a conversation. Diane's face went pale. Dad looked like he might be sick. What is he doing here? Diane demanded. Mr. Patterson walked calmly to the dining room table and set down his briefcase. He pulled out several documents and spread them across the table. I am here to clear up some misconceptions you seem to have about Mr. Thompson's estate. Please sit down. Diane remained standing, her arms crossed defensively. We have rights. We have documentation proving Harold promised Gregory a portion of the estate. Mr. Patterson nodded. Yes, I have seen the email you are referring to. Let me explain why it is completely irrelevant. He put on his reading glasses and picked up the official will. This document was drafted 2 years ago, properly witnessed, notarized, and filed with the county. It clearly states that all properties, savings, and personal assets of Harold Thompson are to be inherited by his daughter Sabrina Marie Thompson. There is no mention of Gregory Thompson, because at the time this will was written, Gregory was no longer part of this family due to his choice to divorce Sabrina and marry you. Diane tried to interrupt, but Mr. Patterson held up his hand. Let me finish. The email you have is dated 3 years ago, before the divorce. It was written in a casual context when Harold and Gregory were discussing retirement planning. The phrase, I will make sure to leave something for you, is not a legally binding promise. It is a general statement made between family members. Furthermore, even if we were to consider it as some kind of verbal contract, which it is not, it was nullified by the divorce and by the subsequent creation of this will. He looked directly at Diane. You have no legal standing to challenge this will. None whatsoever. If you attempt to do so, you will lose, and you will be responsible for your own legal fees, which I assure you will be substantial. Thompson, we can pursue charges of harassment and intimidation. Mr. Thompson's estate included provisions for exactly this scenario. He anticipated that someone might try to challenge his wishes, and he set aside funds specifically for legal defense. The room was completely silent. Diane's face had gone from pale to red. She turned to Dad. You said we had a case. You said your father promised you money. Dad looked miserable. I thought he did, he said weakly. That email seemed like a promise. Mr. Patterson shook his head. It was a kind comment from a father-in-law to his son-in-law during happier times. Nothing more. Mr. Thompson made his true intentions crystal clear in his will. Diane was not ready to give up. What about common law? What about the years Gregory spent as part of this family? He contributed. Mr. Patterson actually chuckled. Contributed how? By having a job and supporting his own household. That is called being an adult. It does not entitle him to his ex-father-in-law's estate. There's no legal precedent for what you are claiming. You are grasping at straws because you see money you think you can get, but you cannot. The law is very clear on this. That is when everything fell apart between Dad and Diane. She spun toward him, her voice rising. You told me we could get at least $100,000 from this. You said your father had always liked you, that he would have wanted you to have something. You said we could use the money to buy that condo in Florida. Dad's eyes widened. I never promised you that. I said maybe, possibly, if there was anything. You absolutely did promise me, Diane shot back. I would not have pushed for this if you had not convinced me we had a real claim. Do you have any idea how much money we have already spent on consultations with that lawyer? The lawyer you insisted we needed. She turned to Mr. Patterson. He told me there was money coming. He told me his father was rich. He told me we deserved a share. It was one of the most uncomfortable moments of my life, watching my father's second marriage crumble right there in my mother's living room. But I also felt a grim satisfaction. This was what greed did to people. It destroyed them from the inside out. Mr. Patterson maintained his professional composure. I think it is time for you both to leave. Mrs. Thompson has been through enough. Her father just passed away, and instead of being allowed to grieve in peace, she has been threatened and harassed. If I hear that you have contacted her again regarding this matter, I will not hesitate to pursue legal action. Am I clear? Dad finally looked at Mom. Really looked at her. For just a second I saw something in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Or shame. Sabrina. I am sorry, he said quietly. I should not have let this happen. I should not have come here like this. Mom's voice was steady when she replied. You are right. You should not have. Now please leave. Diane grabbed her briefcase and stormed toward the door. Dad followed, looking defeated. At the threshold he paused and glanced back one more time, but he did not say anything else. Then they were gone. The door closed, and Mom let out a long, shaky breath. Then she started crying, but this time it was different. These were tears of relief, not fear. Mr. Patterson patted her shoulder gently. Your father was a very wise man, Mrs. Thompson. He protected you well. You will not hear from them again. I will make sure of it. If you need anything else, please do not hesitate to call. And remember, Harold wanted you to be happy. He wanted you to live in this house and feel safe. He would be very proud of how strong you have been. The days following that confrontation felt surreal. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Mom and I spent the rest of that week finishing the task of sorting through Grandpa's belongings. We cried together, laughed together over old memories, and slowly began the process of healing. Mom decided to keep most of Grandpa's furniture. She said it made the house feel like he was still there in spirit. About a week later, I heard through a cousin that Dad and Diane had separated. Apparently, Diane had filed for divorce just 3 days after the meeting at Mom's house. The rumor was that she had done some digging into Dad's finances and realized he was not nearly as well off as she had thought. Whatever money Dad had been making, they had been spending just as fast on Diane's expensive lifestyle. Without the prospect of inheriting money from Grandpa's estate, Diane saw no point in staying married. It was cold and calculating, but honestly, I was not surprised. Dad tried calling me a few times. I let the calls go to voicemail. I listened to his messages, though. In them, he sounded broken. He apologized. He said he had made terrible mistakes. He said he missed me and wanted to explain everything. I was not ready to hear his explanations. Maybe someday I would be, but not yet. The wounds were too fresh. What he had done to Mom, what he had allowed Diane to do, was unforgivable in my eyes. At least for now. Mom, meanwhile, started to truly heal. She went back to work and threw herself into her teaching with renewed energy. Her students noticed the difference. Several parents commented that Mrs. Thompson seemed especially warm and engaged this year. Mom also started spending time in Grandpa's garden at his old house, which was now officially hers. She would drive over there on Saturday mornings and tend to the roses. She said it made her feel close to him. I used part of the trust fund Grandpa left me to hire a contractor. We renovated Mom's kitchen, something she had wanted to do for years but never felt she could afford. We also fixed up some things around the house that needed attention. Fresh paint, new windows, a new deck in the backyard. Mom protested at first, saying I should save that money for my own future. But I reminded her of what Mr. Patterson had told me. Grandpa wanted me to use the money to help her. It was what he would have wanted. One evening in late autumn, about 2 months after everything had settled, Mom and I were sitting on her new deck, watching the sunset. She turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Your grandfather used to say something when I was growing up," she said. "He would tell me that greed destroys people from the inside out, that the most important things in life cannot be bought or sold." I always understood what he meant intellectually, but I never really felt it until now. Watching what happened with your father and Diane, seeing how obsessed they became with money they had no right to, it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I nodded. Grandpa was a smart man. Mom smiled. He was. And he raised me to value the right things. Family, loyalty, love. Those are the things that matter. Not houses or bank accounts. Though I will admit I am grateful he left me this house. Not because of its monetary value, but because it is filled with memories of you growing up here. That is priceless to me. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Mom said something that surprised me. "I do not hate your father, you know. I am disappointed in him. I am hurt by what he did. But I do not hate him. I think he got lost, somewhere along the way. He started chasing things that he thought would make him happy, and he lost sight of what actually mattered. I feel sorry for him more than anything else." I thought about that. "I am not there yet," I admitted. "I am still pretty angry." Mom squeezed my hand. "That is okay. You are allowed to feel however you feel. Just do not let the anger consume you. That is another thing your grandfather taught me. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die." Over the following months, I watched Mom transform. She was not the same woman she had been before the divorce. She was stronger, more confident, more independent. She started taking art classes at the community center. She joined a book club. She even went on a few dates, though nothing serious came of them. She said she was not looking for a relationship, just enjoying meeting new people and rediscovering who she was outside of being someone's wife. As for me, I learned some valuable lessons through all of this. I learned that family is not always about blood. It is about who shows up for you when things get hard. Mom and I had always been close, but going through this ordeal together had bonded us in a new way. I also learned that people will often show you their true character when money is involved. Grandpa had been right about that. Greed really does destroy people. I had watched it destroy my father's second marriage. I had watched it turn Diane into someone willing to harass a grieving widow for money she had no claim to. But I also learned about resilience. I watched my mother face down bullies and come out stronger. I learned about the importance of planning ahead the way Grandpa had done when he wrote that will. He had protected Mom even after his death because he had been thoughtful and prepared. That was a lesson I would carry with me forever. And finally, I learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Mom did not need to destroy Dad or Diane. They destroyed themselves through their own greed and poor choices. All Mom had to do was stand firm, protect what was rightfully hers, and move forward with her life. Sometimes I still think about that Saturday morning when Diane stood at our door with that greedy smirk on her face. She had been so certain she was going to walk away with a fortune. She had looked at my mother like she was an obstacle to be removed. What Diane had not understood, what she could not possibly have understood, was that she was not dealing with just Mom and me. She was dealing with the legacy of love and protection that Grandpa Harold had left behind. She was up against a will drafted by a smart man who loved his daughter and wanted to make sure she would always be safe. She was up against the law, and she had nothing but an old email and a sense of entitlement. I wonder sometimes if Diane ever thinks about that day. If she ever regrets how she acted. But honestly, I do not really care anymore. She is out of our lives. Dad is out of our lives. We have moved on. Mom is happy. I am happy. We have each other, and we have the memories of a wonderful man who loved us enough to protect us even after he was gone. That is worth more than any amount of money. 1 year after Grandpa's death, Mom and I planted a new rose bush in her backyard. It was a beautiful, deep red variety, the same kind Grandpa used to grow in his garden. We planted it on a sunny Sunday afternoon, just the two of us. As we patted down the soil around its roots, Mom said, "This is for new beginnings. For growth. For beauty that comes after pain." I hugged her tightly. Grandpa would love that. She smiled, and it was a genuine, peaceful smile. He would. And he would be so proud of you. The way you stood up for me, the way you handled everything. You are more like him than you know. As I look back on everything that happened, I realize the most important lesson of all. The things that truly matter in life cannot be taken away by greedy people, or legal battles, or divorce proceedings. Love, loyalty, integrity, these are the things that endure. These are the things that my grandfather left behind, and they are worth infinitely more than any house or bank account. Diane came to our door thinking she could take something from us. But she could not. Because what we have, is not something that can be stolen or claimed or divided up in a settlement. It is ours forever. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who tried to take advantage of your family? Have you ever seen how greed can change people? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more true stories about real people facing real challenges and finding their way through. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it reminded you that integrity and love always win in the end. Take care of yourselves and the people you love. Until next time.